Welcome to the Birds vs. Boys game day reaction show. Eagles week 3. Eagles win 24-8 at Lincoln Financial Field South. 3-0 on the year. Things are going well. If I sound raspy or hoarse in my voice at any point during the show, that is because I was at the game with many Eagles fans. And let's just start there. That was an extra home game, so thank you to the NFL. I have never really seen emasculation of that sort where we completely took over the stadium. If you looked, and I had in zone seats, so I looked over to the Eagles sideline and it was entirely green. There were no Washington fans whatsoever on that side, and it almost had Rose Bowl-esque vibes to it where the stadium was split, except obviously in this case, it is not intentional. Great showing by our fans. Just wanted to point that out first. It just felt like a home game. Early on, they got a false start when they were backed up into the end zone, and you just don't see that at away games in the NFL with people just traveling like that. It was incredible. The entire tailgate was Eagles fans, so we pretty much just traveled down to D.C., made a weekend out of it, beat the living hell out of the Commanders, and left 3-0, and for now, first place in the division. You can't ask for much more. It was an incredible time. I know everyone talks about how FedEx Field is just a dump. It is not aesthetically pleasing by any sense, but I felt like just overall, if you're planning a trip in the future, I would recommend it. At least go. It's close. The tailgate scene was all Eagles fans. It was just, in a field instead of lot K or lot M or Jetro lot. So overall, just wanted to point that out first. Eagles fans, awesome. Great time. If you're ever going to make that trip, I would recommend it. And yeah, let's get into the actual game though. That was awesome. That was awesome. We started with Jalen Hurts last week, so let's start with the defense this week. 9 times. 9 times. Ferris Bueller, great movie. The defense was great, but this is also like the thing where with Carson Wentz, where when shows have like these callbacks where you're like, oh, I remember that from the previous season. Watching him hold on to the ball around a bad deep offensive line and just get eaten alive. It was like watching How I Met Your Mother and like, oh, I remember the slap bet. Like that was what was watching Carson Wentz as an opponent where you're like, oh yeah, I remember him holding onto the ball too long and chaos ensuing after that. The offensive line for the Commanders got eaten alive all day by the Eagles defensive line. So some of the sacks were on them. Some of them were on Carson for just holding the ball too long. And it was just like the perfect like callback to like, oh, I remember that happening. Like, I remember that from previous seasons. And then, oh, they brought it back. What a great callback. And that's exactly what it was with those 9 sacks. So great, like full circle Carson Eagles moment with that. And the pressure was on from the beginning. There were 2 sacks on their first drive and then a false start deep into the end zone, or I'm sorry, on the second drive that put them into a 3rd and 27 situation. And you just felt like as soon as the offense got going, that they really couldn't muster anything. And there was one point where I was like, we went for it. And I was like, you know what? Just kick the field goal and make them prove that they could go down the length of the field twice on you and score a touchdown. And they could not. They ended up scoring a touchdown in garbage time. And I was kind of hoping that it'd be 24-2. I thought that'd be a funnier outcome than 24-0 and having the shutout. So I just think the defense, part of it, again, bad offensive line for the Commanders. It's just not good. And Carson holding on to the ball too long. But we got to shout out the defense for having 2 back-to-back weeks where the opponents had great skill position players and they weren't able to utilize them in the function that they're used to. Last week it was Justin Jefferson and Adam Thielen, and you weren't calling their names a lot. We ended up with 3 interceptions off of Kirk Cousins in that situation. Secondary played great. I thought they played well again today. Terry McLaurin had over 100 yards receiving, but, a lot of that was in the second half as this game kind of got away from them. And you didn't hear Curtis Samuel's name. You didn't hear Jahan Dotson's name a lot. They really just couldn't get anything going. But I think the star of the show, anytime you have 9 sacks, 9 times, the only time, like, this is their moment. Like, this was the defensive line and 2 straight weeks of, like, being confident in Jonathan Gannon to get pressure home. They were, bringing extra guys, but they really didn't need to do a ton of that. They brought the blitzes, and again, I thought he brought it at the times that you needed to, but they were getting home with their defensive line, which is great to see that those guys can create pressure on their own. Fletcher Cox turned back the clocks. That was awesome. I know him and Carson are friends, which is really funny that it ended up going like that. Josh Sweat off the edge, Brandon Graham involved. Like, this is exactly what you wanted and what you had hoped when the season had started. And we didn't get that pressure early on, and we were like, uh-oh, And then Derek Barnett tears his ACL, and you're like, wow, this pass rush isn't what we thought. Here is one of the keys. And John Burchard actually, he was on the show, and then he actually brought this up. He was at the game, and I said, so I went to rewatch, and you can see on a lot of the sacks and a lot of the pressure, Jordan Davis is on the field with Fletcher Cox. So you have the big guys in the middle. They're double teaming Davis on every play because he's a monstrosity of a human being. So he is taking up so much space, taking on double teams. The other guys are getting favorable one-on-one matchups, and that's how they're getting home. On the very first sack, you see it, 2 guys paired up, double teaming Jordan Davis. Fletcher Cox is one-on-one, and Josh Sweat is coming off the edge, and he beats the guy around the edge. Fletcher Cox blows his guy back, and all of a sudden, you're getting sacks all over the place. He said on every single play, Jordan Davis was just blowing the safety back or blowing the center back. That's exactly what you expect. So there might come a time where you're saying, oh, the stats aren't there for Jordan Davis. I don't see these sacks. I don't see tackles for loss. And you kind of expected that a little bit at the beginning of the season. At Georgia, he wasn't like a sack master. He takes up space in the middle. So, but I think we're going to come to a point where someone's like, oh, well, the stats aren't there. And then when you watch the film, you're like, oh my God, like this is creating it's almost like an assist in hockey or basketball where you're like, you didn't make the shot, but you are the reason that shot got created. So that was awesome to see, like things just paying off. Like we talked about this last week, like the offseason moves, Kazir White, AJ Brown, like those paying off. And then this one paying off with Jordan Davis, like drafting him. So I think the biggest thing to me was the defensive line today or yesterday, if you're depending on when you're listening. And I just think if you can get that kind of pressure any game, like you're going to be in it with anybody. Like you'll be in any game. You look around the rest of the NFC, the competitors, you'd say Packers, Bucks, or the guys up there, Rams. Like if you're putting pressure on those quarterbacks, that's how you're going to be able to sustain and be a true Super Bowl contender going forward on that defense. So the one thing that I've been like learning about, because it's the hot new analytical topic on the street, is expected points added. And on this show, Kevin and I are eye test guys all the way. Numbers, nerds. Eyes, trust. That's what we always say. This is an eye test podcast, not an X's and O's podcast. But the one thing I've been like learning about is expected points added, because it's not too much of a deep dive into analytics. It's basically like putting value in your downs, your distance, and your yards gained. So a 1st and 10 where you gain 6 yards is a whole lot different and more valuable than a 3rd and 10 where you gain 6 yards and have to punt. So it's putting value on that. The Eagles are 2nd defensively in EPA and 1st offensively in EPA. The only team ahead of them on defense is the Buccaneers, who have pitched close. They gave up 3 points week 1. So you got one team ahead of you. And aside from that, you are 2nd in EPA defense, 1st in EPA on offense. So let's get into the offense. Before we do so, if you like this comment or this content, subscribe to Birds vs. Boys on YouTube, on podcasts, follow us on Twitter. Big week on Twitter. Thank you, Kevin, for holding that down. I had no service at the game. So follow us everywhere. Like, subscribe, help us get these up. Now, over to the offense. Jalen Hurts, again, looked awesome. You can just tell the confidence with Jeet Stroh. And this week was almost more impressive than last week, because last week we were saying these are easy. Like there's Vikings not even around. They're not changing. They're not adapting. Troy Aikman was calling it out during the broadcast. He was saying the Vikings, like their defense is just pretty much giving up so they don't get beat over the top, but they're not adjusting at all. So Jalen Hurts is just taking what they're giving him, and it's too easy. I thought he made a lot of contested throws this week that were perfect. The Devonta Smith ones stick out at the end of the half where he puts it up. Devonta comes down with it at the 1 yard line and then hitting him in the back of the end zone for that touchdown as well. Like some of these throws were tough. He's making tough contested throws that are accurate. The confidence is growing each week. We talked about week 1, heavy reliance on his legs. He rushed 17 times. Well, he only rushed for 20 yards on Sunday, and they ended up with over 400 yards of offense again. That's what you like to see. 343 yards passing, 123.5 passer rating. Like these numbers are because of his legs, which is fantastic. Now, why are they fantastic? These receivers are awesome. We might have 2 1,000-yard receivers on the team. I am just like blown away at it's kind of like the opposite of what the Cowboys are going through, where they got rid of Amari Cooper. They didn't re-sign Randy Gregory. They didn't change the coaching staff, and all the fans that we have talked about and all the bloggers and media members that we've had on this show have said That is what we expected. You decreased in talent, and now you are seeing the results of decreasing in talent. The Eagles are the polar opposite, where you're seeing like, we knew this was the possibility. This was the expectation. You increased talent, and now you're yielding the results. I like this 1-2 combo of Devonta Smith and AJ Brown. I don't know if we've ever had anything like this in my lifetime. Like, T.O. was the best receiver that we've ever had on the Eagles, but that receiving core wasn't great. That was pretty much like a one-man show. Deshaun Jackson and Jeremy Maclin were great, but they were still young. And even back then, that was kind of different, where Deshaun was that deep threat. He was the punt returner, but he wasn't like that guy where AJ Brown is, where he's that like alpha wide receiver one type of, I called him a transformer last week. I know Darius Slay called him like ripped Batman or whatever it was. Now they've got the Batman cape on the sideline, which is awesome. I thought that was the coolest thing ever. So I don't think we've ever had this in our entire lifetime, which is like great. Like, if you're going to build and develop this young quarterback, that is the way to do it. Give him weapons and yield the results, which is exactly what they're doing. Devonta Smith, I thought this was his most impressive game as an Eagle. Some may say the Chargers game last year because, he was a rookie at that time. But 8 receptions, 169 yards, and a touchdown. Go back all the way to when Kevin and I were doing draft prospect review shows and just like going through that draft and determining the prospects we liked. I distinctly remember both of us saying, yes, Devonta Smith is small. He is skinny. You can have those concerns if you want about him not being able to get off the line because of his skinny, wiry frame. But do not be fooled, because this kid can go up and snag the football. That's what you saw on some of those catches. The catch that gets overlooked because it wasn't the drive where he scored the touchdown and came down at the 1 and you thought he broke his back. He has one where he goes over the defender, perfectly placed ball by Jalen Hurts again. He catches it falling out of bounds over the defender and toe taps. He might be the best like toe tap guy in the league, aside from maybe Devontae Adams, already in year 2. It's pretty remarkable what he's able to do in terms of body control. So that is like, again, things playing out in your favor that we discussed. And you're like, this was supposed to play out this way. And it is. We did those shows and we said, yeah, he is skinny. Yeah, he has a wiry frame. I see how that would concern some people, but he has excellent body control. He goes up and gets the ball every chance he gets. Like, he's almost like Calvin Johnson. I'm not saying he is, obviously, but just that he might be 6'1" and 185 soaking wet, but he plays like a person who's 6'4", 215. And that's what you're getting from him. And that's what you got from him yesterday. I thought AJ Brown almost had like a quiet game. And the guy had 8 receptions for 85 yards and a touchdown. Like, you're getting 8 for 85 and a TD. And you're like, oh, well, that wasn't the best performance he's ever had. Like, that is crazy. This offense is just flowing. I'm sure some guy will call into WIP today and be upset that they've scored 24 in the first half of both the last 2 games and be like, oh, but they haven't scored in the second half. Okay. But it's incredible just like watching them just full throttle that end of the half. Like, you cannot execute a half better than that, where you defer, get the ball to start the second half. You go down, score, get a stop, score again, and then come out at halftime and you get the ball back. Like, it just, the Commanders never stood a chance after that. Oh, and you got to stop on their first drive. So they didn't even get points out of getting the ball first. Like, that is how football should be played. That's about the only analytics that I know. We can talk about EPA all we want. All I know is defer, take the ball at half. That way you get the points, the stop, the ball back again. That is exactly how it should go. And that's how it did. I just thought, like, almost flawless execution. And in these second halves, they're really not running a true offense. It's almost like, all right, we went like a 5-minute, 6-minute drive where we're on the field. We just have the ball. And they can do that because that's unfortunately all their offense was last season. So now they almost revert back to that in a good way. Where we're like, all right, we're up 24 points. This is a 3-possession game at the least, probably a 4-possession game. Make them make a play. We'll just sit on the ball. So all in all, I am thrilled with where this team is at. I think they are exceeding expectations. I thought we would be good. I didn't think we would be this good. The only thing that could really slow us down, and you can say this for all 32 teams, is injuries. That's the only way I can see this slowing down here. So just keep this rolling. We've got Jacksonville next week at home. I am just get me to next Sunday at 1:00. We talked about how addicting Eagles football is when you're good last week on the show. Same exact feeling right now. It's Monday as I'm recording this. Beautiful weather because obviously the gods love when the birds win. And all I can think about is getting to Sunday at 1 o'clock. The Jaguars coming from the West Coast and then playing another road game and coming off a big win against the Chargers. But at the same time, like we should fare well. Like I really think that this is going to be a big game for us. So I'm just excited to see it. So again, I love doing these shows and being happy. I feel like I did so many where I was like, what is the fucking direction of this team? So to be able to do this right now where I'm like, I love where things are headed. Now I know it's Philly, so, things come crashing down a lot. But you should be excited with how well things are playing out because they are playing out exactly how we thought they would with Devonta, with AJ, with the defensive line, with Jalen Hurts progressing. This is what we wanted. This is what we hoped for. It's just nice when things work out well in your life and how you plan them. So, signing off again, like and subscribe. Shout out to all the Eagles fans that were at Lincoln Financial Field South on Sunday. Great win. Back next week against the Jags at home. That stadium is going to be loud. I cannot wait. Dougie P returns. Great win for the Birds. Let's keep it rolling.